The call came at 2:47 in the afternoon while I was grading art projects at Cedar Falls Elementary. Dr. Marcus Rivera's voice was careful, measured, but I could hear the tension underneath. "Claire, we need to talk about Milo's test results. What I found? It's not what we expected." My hands trembled as I set down my red pen, watching finger paint masterpieces blur through sudden tears. "The antifreeze poisoning wasn't accidental," he continued quietly. "Someone fed this to your cat deliberately. And Mrs. Thompson, we need to discuss the timeline of when you last saw your mother-in-law. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." 3 days earlier, my world had seemed as perfectly arranged as the seasonal decorations Patricia Thompson insisted on updating in our home every month. Thanksgiving was approaching, and our Maple Ridge Estates neighborhood buzzed with the comfortable rhythm of suburban preparation. David had left early for his regional sales meeting at Northwest Logistics, kissing my forehead with the absent-minded affection of 8 years of marriage. Mom's coming by around 10 to help with the holiday planning, he'd mentioned, already checking his phone for emails. She brought those new tablecloth samples she wanted to show you. I should have recognized the warning signs in that simple statement. Patricia Thompson didn't simply help with anything. She orchestrated, commanded, and reshaped every family gathering according to her exacting standards. But that October morning, sipping coffee in our kitchen on Elm Avenue while Milo purred contentedly on the windowsill, I felt grateful for her involvement. Teaching second graders took all my creative energy, and honestly, Patricia's attention to detail made our holidays magical for David's cousins and their children. Milo stretched luxuriously in the morning sunlight, his gray tabby coat catching golden highlights. At 3 years old, he was still playful, but had developed the dignified air of a cat who knew he was beloved. David had surprised me with Milo during our 4th year of marriage, understanding instinctively that I needed something to nurture while we figured out whether children would be part of our story. "Every home needs a guardian," he'd said, watching Milo explore our living room with kitten curiosity. "And every guardian needs someone to protect." The doorbell rang precisely at 10 o'clock. Patricia's punctuality was legendary. David often joked that she'd arrived at his birth exactly on schedule and had been maintaining that standard ever since. I opened the door to find her standing with military posture, silver hair perfectly styled, holding a leather portfolio, and wearing the smile that never quite reached her pale blue eyes. "Claire, darling," she said, stepping inside without waiting for invitation. "I hope you're prepared for some serious planning today. The Thompson family Thanksgiving has a reputation to maintain." Her gaze swept our living room with the clinical assessment I'd learned to recognize over the years. Nothing was ever quite right for Patricia Thompson. Not the throw pillows I'd chosen, not the family photos David had arranged, certainly not the cat hair that inevitably clung to our furniture despite my best cleaning efforts. "I've got coffee ready," I offered, leading her toward the kitchen. "And I cleared my schedule for the morning." "Wonderful. Now about the seating arrangements." Patricia settled at our kitchen table, spreading fabric samples and printed diagrams across the surface with practiced efficiency. For the next hour, she guided me through an elaborate choreography of family hierarchy, dietary restrictions, and conversational dynamics that would make a UN summit planner weep with admiration. Her attention to detail was genuinely impressive, even if her delivery made me feel like a student being tutored in subjects I should have mastered years ago. Milo wandered into the kitchen around 11:30, probably drawn by the unusual activity. Patricia's expression shifted almost imperceptibly, a tightening around her eyes, a barely perceptible stiffening of her shoulders. "That cat," she murmured, as if his presence had disrupted some invisible order. "Claire, dear, perhaps you should put him in another room while we're working. Cat hair on these fabric samples would be unfortunate." "He's not bothering anything," I said mildly, reaching down to scratch behind Milo's ears. "He usually just finds a sunny spot and naps." Nevertheless, Patricia's tone carried the authority of someone accustomed to immediate compliance. Proper planning requires proper environment. I should have trusted my instincts. Something in her voice, in the way she watched Milo with cold calculation, should have triggered every protective instinct I possessed. Instead, I carried him to our bedroom and closed the door, telling myself I was choosing peace over principle. Patricia Thompson had raised David to be the thoughtful, successful man I'd married. Surely I could endure a few hours of micromanagement in exchange for family harmony. When I returned to the kitchen, Patricia had already begun arranging items from her leather portfolio. Place cards written in her precise handwriting, printed menus with seasonal borders, even small gift bags for each family member. "I took the liberty of ordering these party favors," she explained, displaying miniature pumpkins with personalized ribbons. "Each guest will receive something meaningful, something that reflects the Thompson family values." The next 2 hours passed in a blur of decisions that weren't really decisions. Patricia presented options, I expressed preferences, and somehow my choices always aligned perfectly with what she'd already determined was best. By 1 o'clock, every detail of Thanksgiving dinner had been planned, ordered, or assigned. I felt simultaneously grateful for her thoroughness and exhausted by the subtle pressure to conform to her vision. "I think that covers everything," Patricia said finally, gathering her materials with satisfied efficiency. "The flowers will be delivered Tuesday morning, the specialty groceries Wednesday afternoon. You'll need to pick up the centerpiece candles from Morrison's on Thursday morning. I've already spoken with them about the specific shade of amber we discussed." "Sounds perfect," I agreed, walking her toward the front door. "Thank you for organizing everything so beautifully. Family traditions matter, Claire." Patricia paused at the threshold, her pale eyes studying my face with uncomfortable intensity. "The Thompson name means something in this community. Our gatherings reflect our values, our standards. I'm sure you understand the importance of maintaining that reputation." After she left, I released Milo from the bedroom and watched him explore the kitchen with cautious curiosity. He approached the area where Patricia had been sitting, sniffing delicately at the chair legs and table base before settling into his usual afternoon nap spot by the sliding glass door. Something about his behavior seemed slightly off, a hesitancy I'd never noticed before, but I attributed it to the disruption of his normal routine. David returned home around 6, full of enthusiasm about the holiday plans. "Mom texted me the menu," he said, loosening his tie while I prepared dinner. "Everything sounds incredible. I don't know how you two managed to coordinate all these details." "Your mother has very specific ideas about how things should be done," I replied carefully. David's relationship with Patricia was complex. Deep love mixed with lingering childhood patterns of seeking her approval. Criticizing her methods felt like attacking something fundamental about his identity. "She just wants everything to be special," he said, scratching Milo under the chin. "Growing up, our Thanksgivings were legendary. All the neighbors used to talk about Mom's dinner parties. She's probably excited to have someone who appreciates that level of planning." That evening felt perfectly normal. We watched television, David reviewed sales reports while I finished grading papers. Milo alternated between his favorite spots: the windowsill, the couch arm, the warm space between David's laptop and his leg. Nothing seemed unusual. Nothing triggered alarm. We went to bed planning to spend Tuesday shopping for last-minute Thanksgiving items, Wednesday preparing vegetables, Thursday hosting what would surely be another memorable Thompson family gathering. I woke up Wednesday morning to the sound of Milo vomiting in the hallway outside our bedroom. Not unusual for a cat. They're notorious for hairballs and sensitive stomachs, but something about the sound made me instantly alert. By the time I reached him, he was crouched low, breathing heavily, his normally bright green eyes dull and unfocused.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
"David?" I called, my voice tight with sudden concern. "Something's wrong with Milo." We found him by the water bowl 20 minutes later, collapsed on his side, breathing in short, rapid pants. His gums were pale, his body temperature felt wrong, and when I tried to help him stand, his legs wouldn't support his weight. David was already grabbing car keys while I wrapped Milo in his favorite blanket. The drive to Riverside Animal Hospital felt endless. David navigated morning traffic while I held Milo in my lap, whispering reassurances that felt hollow against the evidence of his deteriorating condition. "He was fine yesterday," I kept repeating. Yesterday evening he was completely normal. Dr. Marcus Rivera met us at the emergency entrance, his dark eyes immediately focused on Milo with professional concern. "How long has he been showing symptoms?" he asked, gently taking the bundled cat from my arms. "Since this morning," David answered. "Maybe 6 hours. He seemed perfectly normal last night." "Any changes in routine? New food? Different environment? Access to anything unusual?" Dr. Rivera was already moving toward an examination room, his hands checking Milo's vital signs with practiced efficiency. "Nothing," I said. "Everything's been completely normal." What followed was 2 hours of tests, IV fluids, and increasingly grim updates. Milo's kidney function was compromised, his blood chemistry suggested toxic exposure, and his neurological responses indicated something far more serious than a typical feline illness. Dr. Rivera's expression grew progressively more concerned as each test result arrived. "I need to ask some difficult questions," he said finally, settling across from David and me in the small consultation room. "Milo's symptoms are consistent with antifreeze poisoning, ethylene glycol exposure. It's unfortunately common because antifreeze has a sweet taste that attracts animals." "That's impossible," David said immediately. "We don't use antifreeze. Our cars are serviced at the dealership, and we don't have any stored in the garage." "What about neighbors? Construction work in the area? Any possibility he could have accessed contaminated water or food?" Dr. Rivera's questions were gentle but persistent. "The timeline suggests exposure occurred within the last 24 to 48 hours. I thought about our quiet neighborhood, the familiar routines, the carefully managed environment Patricia had orchestrated just 2 days earlier." "There's nothing," I insisted. "He doesn't go outside unsupervised. He eats the same food he's eaten for 2 years. Nothing's changed." "Mrs. Thompson," Dr. Rivera said carefully, "I need to be direct about something. The amount of ethylene glycol in Milo's system suggests deliberate administration, not accidental exposure. Someone fed this to your cat." The words hung in the air like physical objects, impossible to process. David's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, anger. "What are you suggesting? That someone deliberately poisoned our cat?" "I'm telling you what the tests indicate," Dr. Rivera replied. "I'm legally required to report suspected animal cruelty to local authorities. But I wanted to speak with you first, to see if there's any explanation we might have missed." I felt the world tilt sideways. Our quiet life in Maple Ridge Estates, our carefully maintained routines, our trusted relationships, none of it provided any framework for understanding deliberate cruelty toward Milo. "Can you save him?" I whispered. "We're doing everything possible," Dr. Rivera assured me. "The next 24 hours will be critical. If we can support his kidney function and prevent further neurological damage, he has a chance." "But Claire, David, someone did this intentionally. You need to think about who had access to your home, who might have opportunity and motive." We drove home in stunned silence. The Thanksgiving preparations that had seemed so important 48 hours earlier now felt surreal against the backdrop of Milo's fight for survival. Our kitchen still bore traces of Patricia's organizational efficiency: lists taped to the refrigerator, fabric samples on the counter, the lingering scent of her expensive perfume. "We need to call the police," David said finally, standing in our living room with his hands clenched into fists. "If someone deliberately hurt Milo, they're going to pay for it." "Who would do this?" I asked, though something cold was already forming in my stomach. Who had access? Who knew our routines well enough to— The thought crystallized before I could finish the sentence. David saw it in my expression, watched the horrible understanding dawn across my face. "No," he said immediately. "Absolutely not. My mother loves animals. She would never hurt Milo." But I was already remembering Patricia's reaction to Milo's presence in the kitchen, her insistence that he be removed from the room, the way she'd watched him with something that wasn't affection. The cold calculation in her pale blue eyes when she'd told me that proper planning required proper environment. "David," I said carefully, "your mother was here Monday morning. She was in the kitchen for over 2 hours. She had access to everything. Stop! His voice carried a warning I'd rarely heard. My mother has been planning this Thanksgiving for weeks. She's excited about having family together. She would never do anything to hurt us. That night, while David made phone calls to family members about possibly postponing Thanksgiving dinner, I sat in our bedroom looking through the photos on my phone. Pictures of Milo as a kitten, curled up with David on the couch. Milo investigating Christmas presents, hiding in gift boxes, playing with ribbons. 8 years of family memories that included Patricia at every major gathering, always smiling for the camera, always positioned at the center of Thompson family traditions. But in every photo that included both Patricia and Milo, I noticed something I'd never seen before. She never touched him, never petted him or acknowledged his presence. In candid shots, her expression when looking at our cat was carefully neutral, but her body language suggested distance, distaste, even hostility. I scrolled back further, to photos from early in our marriage. Patricia holding David's cousin's baby, cooing over the toddlers, lavishing attention on children and grandchildren, but never interacting with pets. In fact, I realized with growing unease I'd never seen Patricia show affection toward any animal. The timeline was damning. Patricia had been in our home Monday morning. Milo had seemed slightly off that afternoon. By Wednesday morning, he was fighting for his life. Dr. Rivera had said the exposure occurred within 24 to 48 hours of symptoms appearing. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. "Darling, I heard about poor Milo. So sorry to hear about the accident. These things happen with outdoor cats. Perhaps this is a sign that it's time to focus on more important family matters. See you Thursday." I read the message 3 times, my hands shaking with each reading. Milo had never been an outdoor cat. Patricia knew that. We'd had countless conversations about keeping him safe inside. Her assumption that this was an accident involving outdoor exposure felt deliberately misleading. But the final sentence made my blood run cold. Perhaps this is a sign that it's time to focus on more important family matters. Patricia Thompson had poisoned my cat, and she was expecting me to serve her Thanksgiving dinner in less than 24 hours. Thursday morning arrived with the cruel brightness of a perfect autumn day. The kind of weather that should have accompanied family gratitude and celebration, not the hollow ache of betrayal that had kept me awake most of the night. David moved through our morning routine with mechanical precision, making coffee and checking his phone for updates from Dr. Rivera while I stared at Patricia's text message for the 100th time. I hadn't told David about the message yet. How could I explain that his mother's response to our cat's near-death experience was to suggest we focus on more important matters? How could I voice my growing certainty that the woman who had raised him was capable of deliberate cruelty? The David the first married was loyal to his core, and that loyalty extended especially to Patricia Thompson, the woman who had sacrificed everything to raise him alone after his father's death when David was 12. The phone rang at 8:15. Dr. Rivera's voice carried cautious optimism. "Milo made it through the night. His kidney function is stabilizing, and we're seeing some neurological improvement. He's not out of danger yet, but he's fighting." Relief flooded through me so completely that I had to sit down. David took the phone, asking detailed questions about treatment protocols and recovery timelines while I pressed my face into my hands and tried not to sob. Milo was alive. Whatever else happened today, my sweet gray tabby was still fighting. "Can we see him?" David asked. "This afternoon would be better," Dr. Rivera replied. "Let him rest this morning, and we'll evaluate his condition around 2 o'clock. But Claire, David, I need to remind you that the police will want to speak with you both. Detective Sarah Martinez from Cedar Falls Animal Cruelty Unit will be contacting you today." After hanging up, David turned to me with an expression I'd never seen before, equal parts relief and determination. "Someone tried to kill our cat," he said quietly. "Someone came into our home and deliberately hurt Milo. I don't care who it is, Claire. I want them caught." I nodded, unable to trust my voice. The irony was devastating. David's protective instincts were finally aroused, his sense of justice fully engaged, and I was about to tell him that the perpetrator was the woman he'd spent 34 years loving and respecting. "David," I began carefully, "we need to talk about who had access to our house this week." "I've been thinking about that all night," he said, beginning to pace our kitchen. "The cleaning service was here Friday, but they've been coming for 2 years. Linda Carter has a key for emergencies, but she's been our neighbor for 6 years. The only other person who was in our house recently was—" He stopped mid-sentence, his face going very still. I watched the realization dawn slowly, saw him fight against the logical conclusion his own words were leading him toward. "Mom was here Monday," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "For over 2 hours," I confirmed gently. "She had complete access to the kitchen, and she specifically asked me to remove Milo from the room." David's expression cycled through denial, confusion, and something approaching anger. "There has to be another explanation. Maybe someone came to the door while she was here. Maybe someone—" "David." I pulled out my phone and showed him Patricia's text message. "Read this." He stared at the screen for a long moment, his face growing progressively paler. "She assumed he was an outdoor cat, but Mom knows Milo never goes outside. And she called it an accident before anyone mentioned how it happened," I added quietly. "She's already expecting us to move on, to focus on family matters she considers more important." The silence stretched between us, heavy with implications neither of us wanted to voice. David sank into a kitchen chair, running his hands through his hair in a gesture I recognized as his response to overwhelming stress. "This is insane, Claire. You're talking about my mother. The woman who taught me right from wrong, who worked 2 jobs to put me through college, who's never hurt anything in her life." "Has she ever had pets?" I asked gently. David looked up, confusion flickering across his features. "What? In all the stories you've told me about growing up, all the family gatherings I've attended, all the photo albums we've looked through together, has your mother ever owned a pet? Ever shown affection toward animals?" The question seemed to surprise him. He thought for several minutes, his brow furrowed with concentration. "No," he said slowly. "She always said pets were too much responsibility, too messy. She said families had more important priorities." "And how has she acted around Milo over the years?" Another long pause. "She's never really, she's polite about him, but she doesn't." David's voice trailed off as memory after memory provided unwelcome evidence. "She always suggests we put him away when she visits. She complains about cat hair. She's made comments about people who treat pets like children. David, I think your mother sees Milo as competition for your attention, for family resources, for her position as the most important thing in your life." The words hung in the air like an accusation. David's face contorted with pain, and I could see him struggling between his protective instincts toward Milo and his lifelong devotion to Patricia. "Even if that were true," he said finally, "even if she resented Milo, that doesn't mean she'd try to kill him. That's a huge leap, Claire." I understood his resistance. Patricia Thompson had shaped David's entire worldview, had been his primary source of love and guidance for over 3 decades. Accepting that she was capable of deliberate cruelty meant questioning the foundation of his identity, the core relationships that had defined his life. But I also knew what I'd seen in her pale blue eyes Monday morning, the cold calculation with which she'd watched Milo, the careful way she'd engineered his removal from the room. And I knew what Dr. Rivera had told us about the deliberate nature of the poisoning. "There's one way to find out," I said quietly. "We need to search for evidence." David looked at me with something approaching horror. "You want to search my mother's house?" "I want to find out the truth. If your mother is innocent, then someone else had access to antifreeze and opportunity to poison Milo. But David, if she's guilty, we need evidence before she has a chance to dispose of it." The conversation that followed was one of the most difficult of our marriage. David wavered between defending Patricia and acknowledging the mounting evidence against her. I found myself walking a careful line between presenting facts and respecting his emotional attachment to the woman who had raised him alone. Finally, around 10 o'clock, he made a decision that surprised me. "I'm going to call Mom and ask her directly." "David, no. If she's guilty, that just gives her warning to cover her tracks. And if she's innocent, it clears her name and we can focus on finding the real perpetrator. He was already reaching for his phone. I've known my mother for 34 years, Claire. I'll be able to tell if she's lying. I wanted to argue, but I could see the determination in his expression. This was David's way of testing his own suspicions, of forcing a confrontation that might resolve the terrible uncertainty we were both feeling. Patricia answered on the second ring, her voice carrying its usual blend of warmth and authority. David, darling, I was just thinking about you. How is poor Milo this morning? He's stable, David replied, putting the phone on speaker. Mom, I need to ask you something directly, and I need you to be completely honest with me. A pause. Of course, sweetheart. What's troubling you? The vet says Milo was deliberately poisoned with antifreeze. Someone fed it to him intentionally. Do you know anything about this? The silence that followed was telling. Not the immediate shock and horror I would have expected from an innocent person, but a calculated pause that suggested careful consideration of how to respond. David, Patricia said finally, her voice taking on a tone I'd heard her use when he was a child and had questioned her decisions. That's a very serious accusation. Are you certain the veterinarian knows what he's talking about? Dr. Rivera ran multiple tests. There's no doubt about the poisoning or its deliberate nature. Mom, you were in our house Monday morning. You had access to everything. I need to know if you did this. Another pause, longer this time. When Patricia spoke again, her voice carried a different quality entirely. Colder, more controlled. David, I think you're allowing stress to cloud your judgment. Accidents happen with pets. Perhaps it's time to consider whether maintaining a cat is worth this kind of emotional turmoil. I felt David's hand tighten around mine. Patricia hadn't denied involvement. She hadn't expressed shock or outrage at the suggestion. Instead, she deflected and suggested we abandon Milo altogether. That's not an answer, Mom. David's voice was steady but strained. Did you poison our cat? I think this conversation has become inappropriate, Patricia replied, her tone shifting to the icy authority I'd learned to recognize as her response to challenges to her control. I'll be at your house at 2 o'clock to prepare for tonight's dinner. We can discuss your pet situation then, when you've had time to calm down and think rationally. She hung up without waiting for a response. David stared at the phone for a long moment, his face cycling through emotions I could barely track. Hurt, confusion, dawning realization, and something that might have been grief. She didn't deny it, he said quietly. No, she didn't. She referred to Milo as our pet situation, like he was a problem to be solved. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Watching David confront the reality of his mother's cruelty was heartbreaking, but I could see something else emerging in his expression. The same protective instincts that had made him fight for promotions to provide better security for our family, the same sense of justice that made him mentor younger colleagues at Northwest Logistics. She's coming here at 2, he said, his voice gaining strength. She's planning to waltz into our home and prepare dinner like nothing happened, like our cat isn't fighting for his life because of what she did. What do you want to do? I asked carefully. David was quiet for several minutes, staring out our kitchen window toward the street where Patricia would soon arrive with her perfectly organized holiday plans and her expectation of continued family devotion. I want evidence, he said finally. Before she gets here, before tonight's dinner, before she has any more opportunity to hurt what we love, I want proof of what she did, and then I want her to face the consequences. The transformation in David's demeanor was striking. The confused, conflicted man who had spent the morning defending his mother was gone, replaced by someone I recognized but rarely saw. The version of David who emerged during true crises, who could compartmentalize emotion and focus entirely on solving problems. Call Detective Martinez, he continued. Tell her we want to speak with her before 2 o'clock. And call Linda Carter. Ask if she saw anything unusual Monday morning, any visitors or strange activity. As I made the phone calls, David disappeared into our home office. When he returned, he was carrying a legal pad covered with his precise handwriting and a small digital camera I'd forgotten we owned. What's that? I asked. Timeline and evidence log, he replied. If we're going to accuse my mother of attempted murder, we're going to do it right. Dates, times, witness statements, physical evidence. Everything documented and organized. Detective Martinez agreed to meet us at 11:30. Linda Carter was more than willing to talk, mentioning that she'd noticed Patricia's car in our driveway much longer than usual Monday morning and had wondered if everything was all right. As we prepared for what would essentially be building a criminal case against David's mother, I felt a mixture of pride and sorrow. Pride in watching my husband choose justice over blind loyalty. Sorrow for the family relationships that would never survive what we were about to uncover. At 11:15, David's phone buzzed with a text message from Patricia, bringing some special family recipes for tonight. Can't wait to share them with you both. See you soon? Special recipes, David said grimly. I wonder what other surprises she has planned. Detective Martinez arrived precisely on time, a compact woman with intelligent dark eyes and the kind of quiet authority that suggested extensive experience with difficult family situations. She listened to our account without interruption, taking detailed notes and asking pointed questions about access, opportunity, and Patricia's behavior patterns. The circumstantial evidence is compelling, she said finally, but we need more than suspicious timing and evasive phone conversations to build a case. Mrs. Thompson, do you have any physical evidence from Monday morning? Anything your mother-in-law might have left behind? I thought about Patricia's meticulous organization, her habit of cleaning up after herself, her careful attention to detail in all family gatherings. She's very thorough about not leaving messes, I said slowly. But she did spend time in our kitchen, and she had that leather portfolio with her planning materials. What kind of planning materials? Fabric samples, menu cards, place settings. She spread everything across our kitchen table for over an hour. Detective Martinez nodded thoughtfully. Fabric absorbs residue. If she handled antifreeze and then touched those materials, we might find traces. Do you still have access to any of the items she brought? David and I exchanged glances. Patricia had taken most of her materials with her, but she'd left behind the printed menus and place cards that would be used for tonight's dinner. The place cards are in our dining room buffet, I said. She wrote them by hand and left them here so they wouldn't get damaged. I'd like to test those for chemical residue, Detective Martinez said. And I want to be here when your mother-in-law arrives this afternoon. If she's guilty, confronting her with evidence might prompt a confession. As Detective Martinez prepared her equipment and David organized his documentation, I found myself thinking about the elaborate Thanksgiving dinner that would never happen. All of Patricia's careful planning, her insistence on maintaining Thompson family traditions, her determination to create the perfect holiday gathering, and it had all been built around her expectation that we'd simply accept Milo's death and move forward with family obligations. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. She'd tried to murder our beloved pet and then expected us to serve her dinner, to smile and express gratitude for her organizational skills, to maintain the facade of family harmony while our cat fought for his life. At 12:30, Detective Martinez's preliminary tests on the place cards came back positive for ethylene glycol residue. Patricia Thompson had handled antifreeze recently, enough that traces remained on materials she'd touched Monday morning. That's our smoking gun, Detective Martinez said grimly. Now we wait for her to arrive and see if she'll tell us the truth. David stared at the positive test results, his face pale but resolved. She really did it. My mother really tried to kill Milo. The question now, Detective Martinez said, is whether this was an isolated incident or part of a pattern. Has your mother ever shown concerning behavior toward other family members? Other pets? Anyone who might have represented competition for your attention? The question hung in the air as we prepared for Patricia's arrival, and I found myself wondering what other secrets we might uncover about the woman who had shaped David's entire life. If she was capable of poisoning our cat out of jealousy or control, what else might she have done over the years to maintain her position as the center of David's world? At 1:45, Patricia's silver sedan pulled into our driveway with characteristic punctuality. Through our front window, I watched her gather her materials from the back seat, check her appearance in the side mirror, and walk toward our front door with the confident bearing of someone who expected to be welcomed warmly into the home where she'd committed a crime just 3 days earlier. David's jaw was set with grim determination as he moved toward the door. "Let's find out what kind of woman raised me," he said quietly. "And then let's make sure she faces justice for what she did to Milo." Patricia's knock was measured and authoritative, the same rhythm she'd used throughout David's childhood to announce her arrival home from work. 3 firm raps, a pause, then 2 more. David looked at me one final time, his expression a mixture of resolve and heartbreak, before opening the door to face the woman who had raised him and tried to murder our cat. "Hello, Mother," he said, his voice carefully neutral. Patricia stepped across the threshold with her usual air of ownership, carrying 2 large shopping bags and wearing the satisfied smile of someone who believed her careful plans were proceeding perfectly. She'd dressed for the occasion in her favorite burgundy sweater and pearl necklace, the same outfit she wore to all important Thompson family gatherings. "David, darling!" "Claire!" Her greeting carried the forced enthusiasm I'd learned to recognize as her performance of maternal warmth. "I hope you're both feeling better about poor Milo." These little setbacks happen, but family gatherings are so important for healing. The casual dismissal of Milo's near-death experience as a little setback sent rage coursing through my veins, but I managed to keep my expression composed. Detective Martinez was positioned in our home office, listening through the partially open door, while David and I had agreed to let Patricia reveal her guilt through her own words. "Actually, Mom, we learned some interesting things about Milo's condition," David said, closing the front door behind her. "The veterinarian confirmed that someone deliberately poisoned him with antifreeze." Patricia's reaction was subtle but telling. No shock, no horror, no immediate questions about who might have done such a thing. Instead, she paused in removing her coat, her pale blue eyes calculating before she arranged her features into an expression of mild concern. "How terrible!" she said finally. "You really should be more careful about what you leave accessible. Antifreeze has such a sweet taste, and cats are notoriously curious." "We don't have antifreeze in our home," I said quietly. "Someone had to bring it here and feed it to Milo directly." "Well," Patricia replied, hanging her coat in our front closet with deliberate precision, "I'm sure the police will figure out who's responsible. These neighborhood vandals can be so cruel. Now, shall we focus on preparing for tonight's dinner? I brought some wonderful additions to our menu." The sheer audacity of her performance was stunning. Patricia was standing in our living room, discussing Thanksgiving preparations while our cat fought for his life because of her deliberate actions. Her ability to compartmentalize, to maintain the facade of loving grandmother and family organizer while having committed attempted murder, revealed a level of calculated cruelty I'd never imagined possible. David's face had gone very pale, but his voice remained steady. "Mom, I need you to look me in the eye and tell me you didn't poison Milo." Patricia turned to face her son fully, and I watched something shift in her expression. The maternal warmth disappeared entirely, replaced by something colder and more honest. "David, you're being ridiculous. Why would I concern myself with your pet's health problems? I have more important things to worry about." "That's not a denial," David observed. "It's an indication that you're asking inappropriate questions," Patricia replied, her tone taking on the sharp edge I'd heard her use when David was a teenager and had challenged her authority. "I didn't drive across town to be interrogated about your animal's medical issues. I came to prepare a family dinner that honors Thompson traditions." She moved toward our kitchen, apparently expecting the conversation to end there, but David stepped into her path. "The police are investigating this as animal cruelty. They found evidence that whoever poisoned Milo handled antifreeze recently and then touched other items in our house." Patricia stopped walking, her shopping bag still clutched in her hands. For the first time since arriving, she looked genuinely concerned, but not about Milo's welfare. Her eyes darted toward the kitchen, where she'd spent Monday morning organizing Thanksgiving details, and I could practically see her mental inventory of everything she'd touched. "That's impossible," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I haven't been near any antifreeze." "Then you won't mind if we test your belongings for chemical residue," Detective Martinez said, emerging from the home office. She displayed her badge with practiced authority. Mrs. Thompson, I'm Detective Sarah Martinez with Cedar Falls Animal Cruelty Unit. I'd like to ask you some questions about your activities Monday morning. The transformation in Patricia was immediate and dramatic. The confident family matriarch vanished, replaced by someone who looked genuinely frightened for the first time in my 8 years of knowing her. She gripped her shopping bags tighter, her knuckles white with tension. "I don't have to answer any questions," she said, her voice rising slightly. "I came here to cook dinner for my family, not to be ambushed by police accusations." "You're absolutely right," Detective Martinez replied calmly. "You don't have to answer questions. But I do need to inform you that we've already found traces of ethylene glycol on items you handled Monday morning. We have evidence placing you at this residence during the time frame when Milo was poisoned, and we have witness statements about your behavior patterns toward the victim." "Victim?" Patricia's laugh was sharp and bitter. "It's a cat, Detective. A pet. You're treating this like I murdered a person." The words hung in the air like a confession. Not a denial of poisoning Milo, but a dismissal of the seriousness of her actions because the victim was just an animal. David's face crumpled with pain and disappointment that was heartbreaking to witness. In Oregon, deliberately poisoning an animal is a felony, Detective Martinez informed her. The law doesn't distinguish between the value you place on an animal's life and the protection they deserve from cruelty. Patricia's composed facade was cracking visibly. She set down her shopping bags and looked around our living room as if seeing it for the first time. Her gaze lingered on the family photos that included Milo, the cat furniture we'd bought for his comfort, the obvious evidence that our pet was a beloved family member rather than a mere possession. "This is insane," she said finally. "David, you're letting strangers turn you against your own mother over a cat. A cat that takes attention away from family obligations, that creates mess and expense, that serves no useful purpose in building your life or career." "His purpose," David said quietly, "was to be loved. That was enough." Patricia stared at her son as if he'd spoken in a foreign language. "Love? David, I taught you better than that. I taught you to focus on what matters. Success, reputation, family legacy. I didn't sacrifice my entire life raising you alone so you could waste emotional energy on pets." The words revealed everything. Patricia hadn't just resented Milo because he was a cat. She'd resented him because he represented competition for David's devotion, proof that her son could form deep emotional attachments that didn't center around her needs and expectations. "What sacrifice?" David asked, and I could hear decades of stored questions in his voice. "Mom, you chose to be a single parent. Dad died when I was 12. But you made decisions about how to handle that loss. You chose to make yourself the center of my world. I chose to ensure you had everything you needed to succeed," Patricia shot back. "I worked 2 jobs to pay for your education. I managed every aspect of your life to guarantee you'd have opportunities I never had. And this is how you repay me? By valuing some animal's life over your relationship with your mother?" Detective Martinez had been taking notes throughout the exchange, but she looked up at Patricia's words. "Mrs. Thompson, are you admitting that you poisoned the cat because you viewed him as competition for your son's attention?" The direct question seemed to shock Patricia back to awareness of her legal situation. She looked around the room again, taking in David's expression of growing horror, my obvious disgust, and Detective Martinez's professional scrutiny. "I want a lawyer," she said finally. "That's your right," Detective Martinez confirmed. "But I should inform you that we have enough evidence to arrest you right now. Chemical residue on materials you handled, opportunity, and what sounds very much like a confession about your motives." "It wasn't supposed to kill him," Patricia said suddenly, her voice breaking for the first time. "I just wanted him to get sick. Sick enough that you'd realize pets are too much trouble, too much expense. I thought if he had recurring health problems, you'd make the practical decision to rehome him." The admission hit David like a physical blow. He sank into our living room chair, staring at his mother with an expression of complete devastation. "You tried to murder our cat because you wanted me to get rid of him." "I tried to solve a problem," Patricia corrected, apparently believing this distinction mattered. "David, you're 34 years old. It's time to start thinking about real family. Children, not pets. A wife who focuses on supporting your career, not playing house with animals." I was trying to help you mature. By poisoning an innocent creature who never hurt anyone. By removing a distraction from what should be your priorities, Patricia replied, her voice regaining some of its familiar authority. Claire spends more time and energy on that cat than she does on networking events that could advance your career. You schedule your lives around veterinary appointments and pet care instead of building professional relationships. That animal has been holding you back for 3 years. I found my voice finally, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. Milo has been bringing joy to our lives for 3 years. The only thing holding David back is your constant interference in our marriage. Patricia's pale eyes fixed on me with undisguised hatred. You have no idea what I've done for this family. What I've sacrificed to ensure David's success. I've organized every important event in his life, managed every social obligation, maintained every family tradition. And you think your little pet deserves equal consideration with Thompson family legacy? I think, Detective Martinez interjected, that we've heard enough to understand motive, means, and opportunity. Mrs. Thompson, I'm placing you under arrest for animal cruelty in the 1st degree. As Detective Martinez recited Miranda rights, Patricia looked at David with an expression that somehow managed to combine desperation with continued authority. David, don't let them do this. I'm your mother. Everything I've done has been for your benefit. Call your lawyer, post bail, and we can work through this family disagreement privately. David stood slowly, his face older than I'd ever seen it. Mom, you tried to kill something I love because you couldn't control the fact that I love it. That's not a family disagreement. That's a crime. I raised you to have better judgment than this, Patricia said, her voice taking on the cutting edge that had shaped David's childhood. I expected you to understand priorities. Family loyalty should mean something. It does mean something, David replied. It means protecting the innocent members of our family from people who would hurt them. Milo is family. You tried to murder him. My loyalty is to him, not to you. As Detective Martinez led Patricia toward the front door, she turned back one final time. You'll regret this, David. When you're 40 and childless because you chose pets over a mother who sacrificed everything for you, you'll understand what a mistake you're making. The only mistake I made, David said quietly, was trusting you with access to our home and our lives. That won't happen again. After they left, David and I sat in our living room in stunned silence. The shopping bags Patricia had brought were still sitting by our front door, filled with what she'd described as special additions to tonight's Thanksgiving menu. The irony was devastating. She'd planned to celebrate family togetherness just hours after confessing to attempted murder. I need to call work and cancel my vacation days, David said eventually. And we should go see Milo. David, are you okay? He considered the question seriously, staring at the family photos that covered our mantel. Pictures of our wedding, holiday gatherings, birthday celebrations. Patricia featured prominently in most of them, always positioned at the center of family groups, always wearing the satisfied smile of someone who believed she controlled every aspect of the occasion. I keep thinking about all the times she criticized you, he said finally. All the subtle comments about how you prioritized Milo over family obligations. All the suggestions that pets were a waste of resources. I thought she was just being practical, old-fashioned. I never imagined she was planning to eliminate what she saw as competition. What are you going to do about Thanksgiving dinner tonight? David's laugh was hollow. Cancel it, obviously. Call all the relatives and explain that the family matriarch has been arrested for animal cruelty. Try to explain that the woman who taught me about responsibility and moral behavior tried to murder our cat because she was jealous of the attention we gave him. The phone rang, interrupting our processing of the morning's revelations. Dr. Rivera's voice carried genuine excitement. Claire, David, I have wonderful news. Milo's kidney function has improved dramatically. His neurological responses are almost back to normal. If this progress continues, he should be able to come home by Saturday. The relief was overwhelming. After 3 days of uncertainty and the horrible confrontation with Patricia, knowing that Milo would survive and recover felt like a miracle. Dr. Rivera, David said, I need to tell you that we found out who poisoned him. My mother has been arrested. She confessed to deliberately giving him antifreeze because she resented his place in our family. I'm sorry to hear that, David, but I'm not entirely surprised. In my experience, animal cruelty often stems from jealousy or control issues within families. The important thing is that Milo will be fine, and that the person responsible is facing consequences. After hanging up, David pulled out his phone and began making calls. First to his supervisor at Northwest Logistics, explaining that he needed additional time off to deal with a family emergency. Then to his Aunt Margaret, his cousin Tom, and Uncle Frank, canceling tonight's dinner and providing a carefully edited version of Patricia's arrest. "How much are you telling them?" I asked. "Enough to ensure they understand this isn't a temporary family disagreement," David replied. "Patricia tried to kill our cat because she couldn't control the fact that we love him. That's not something we can work through with family counseling. The conversations were difficult but necessary." David's relatives had spent decades accepting Patricia's authority in family matters, her role as the organizer and decision-maker for all Thompson gatherings. Explaining that she'd committed a crime out of jealousy and control issues challenged fundamental assumptions about the woman they'd all respected and relied upon. By evening, word had spread through David's extended family. Some relatives expressed shock and support. Others seemed to believe this was an overreaction to what they characterized as an unfortunate accident involving a pet. The division was immediate and painful, forcing David to confront the reality that some family members would choose Patricia's version of events over the evidence of her guilt. "Uncle Frank thinks we should drop the charges," David told me after his final phone call. "He says families should handle these things privately, that prosecuting my mother will just create more division." "What did you tell him?" "That if someone tried to murder his grandson, he wouldn't handle it privately. That Milo being a cat instead of a human child doesn't make attempted murder acceptable." That night, we ordered pizza and ate dinner on our living room floor, surrounded by the remnants of Patricia's abandoned Thanksgiving preparations. Place cards she'd written by hand, fabric samples she'd selected for table settings, menu cards that detailed the elaborate meals she'd planned to serve after confessing to animal cruelty. "Do you think she's right about anything?" David asked suddenly. "About pets being a distraction from more important priorities?" I looked at him carefully, recognizing the question as his attempt to process decades of Patricia's influence on his worldview. "Do you think loving Milo has made you less successful at work, less committed to our marriage, less capable of building meaningful relationships?" "No," he said immediately. "If anything, caring for him has made me more compassionate, more aware of what it means to be responsible for something vulnerable." Then Patricia was wrong about priorities. Love isn't a finite resource, David. Loving Milo doesn't diminish your capacity to love people. It increases it. She spent my entire childhood teaching me that success meant making practical choices, putting achievement over emotion, focusing on long-term goals instead of immediate pleasure. And then she tried to kill our cat because we chose love over practicality. The contradiction was stark and painful. Patricia had raised David to value responsibility and moral behavior, then demonstrated that her own moral framework disappeared when it conflicted with her need for control. As we prepared for bed, David paused at our bedroom window that overlooked the street where Patricia had parked Monday morning when she came to poison Milo. "I keep thinking about all the family gatherings she organized," he said, "all the traditions she maintained, all the effort she put into creating perfect holidays. Was any of it real? Did she actually care about family togetherness? Or was it all about controlling the narrative?" "Maybe both," I suggested. Maybe she genuinely believed that controlling every aspect of family life was how she showed love. But when that control was threatened, when you formed attachments she couldn't manage, her true priorities became clear. Saturday morning arrived with the promise of Milo's homecoming. Dr. Rivera called early to confirm that our cat was ready for discharge, his kidney function fully restored and his neurological responses completely normal. "He's been asking for you," Dr. Rivera said with gentle humor. "Well, as much as cats can ask for anything. He's been very vocal about wanting to go home." The drive to Riverside Animal Hospital felt entirely different from our desperate Wednesday morning race to save Milo's life. Instead of panic and uncertainty, we carried hope and relief. Instead of wondering if our beloved pet would survive, we were planning his recovery and celebrating his resilience. Milo greeted us with purrs and headbutts, clearly eager to leave the veterinary clinic behind. He looked thinner than before his ordeal, and his movements were slightly careful, but his green eyes were bright and alert. Dr. Rivera provided detailed instructions for his continued recovery and scheduled follow-up appointments to monitor his kidney function. One more thing, Dr. Rivera said as we prepared to leave. Detective Martinez asked me to give you this. He handed David a business card. She said Patricia Thompson posted bail yesterday evening and that you should be aware of her release. The news cast a shadow over our celebration of Milo's recovery. Patricia was free, probably angry about her arrest, and potentially planning some form of retaliation for what she undoubtedly viewed as David's betrayal of family loyalty. "Do you think she'll try to contact us?" I asked as we drove home. "I think she'll try to convince herself and everyone else that we overreacted," David replied. "That this was all a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. But Claire, whatever she does, whatever pressure the family puts on us, I'm not backing down. She tried to kill Milo, and she has to face consequences for that choice." As we carried Milo into our home, I felt a mixture of gratitude and apprehension. Our cat was safe, our marriage had survived the revelation of Patricia's cruelty, and David had chosen justice over family loyalty when forced to make that choice. But I also knew that Patricia Thompson wasn't someone who accepted defeat gracefully, and that our decision to prosecute her would have consequences we couldn't yet imagine. Milo settled immediately into his favorite spot by the sliding glass door, purring contentedly as afternoon sunlight warmed his gray fur. He was home, he was safe, and he was surrounded by people who valued his life and his place in our family. Whatever Patricia tried to do in response to her arrest, whatever family relationships we lost because of our decision to seek justice, Milo's survival and recovery made it all worthwhile. The first sign of Patricia's retaliation came 3 days after Milo's homecoming, delivered through what should have been a routine phone call from David's work. Linda Garrett from Human Resources sounded uncomfortable as she explained that Northwest Logistics had received an anonymous complaint about David's professional conduct. "Someone called claiming you've been missing important client meetings to deal with personal pet emergencies," Linda said carefully. "They suggested your priorities might not align with company expectations for management-level employees." David's jaw tightened as he processed the implications. "Linda, I've used exactly 2 personal days in the last 6 months, both related to a family crisis that involved potential criminal activity. My client relationships are solid, my sales numbers are above target, and I've never missed a meeting without proper notification. I know that, David. Your supervisor knows that. This complaint doesn't match your performance record at all. But I'm required to document it officially and ask if there are any personal circumstances affecting your work that the company should be aware of." After hanging up, David turned to me with grim recognition. "She's going after my job now." Anonymous complaints about my professionalism, suggesting that caring about Milo makes me unreliable as an employee. The pattern became clear over the following week. David's Aunt Margaret called, expressing concern about, quote, family division, and suggesting that prosecuting Patricia was tearing apart Thompson family unity. Uncle Frank mentioned that Patricia had been devastated by David's betrayal and was struggling with depression because her own son had chosen strangers and animals over family loyalty. "She's orchestrating this," I realized as we compared notes about the various calls and messages. "Patricia's mobilizing every relationship you have to pressure you into dropping the charges." "It's not going to work," David said firmly, but I could see the toll it was taking. Decades of conditioning to seek Patricia's approval, to prioritize family harmony, to view himself as responsible for his mother's emotional well-being, were all working against his rational knowledge that she'd committed a crime. The most insidious attack came through David's cousin Jenny, who called with what sounded like genuine concern. "David, I'm worried about you," she said, her voice carrying the same maternal tone Patricia had perfected over the years. "Everyone's talking about how this situation has changed you. You used to be so level-headed about family matters. So good at finding compromises. Now you're letting anger cloud your judgment. Anger? David's voice was carefully controlled. Jenny, my mother tried to murder our cat because she was jealous of the attention we gave him. What part of that should I be compromising about? But it's Aunt Patricia, Jenny replied, as if Patricia's identity somehow negated her actions. She raised you single-handedly after Uncle Robert died. She sacrificed everything for your education and success. Doesn't that history count for something? The conversation continued for 20 minutes, with Jenny systematically undermining David's confidence in his own perceptions. She suggested that perhaps Milo's poisoning had been accidental, that Patricia's confession might have been coerced, that family healing required forgiveness rather than criminal prosecution. By the time David hung up, he looked emotionally drained. She almost had me convinced, he admitted. For a few minutes, I started wondering if I was overreacting. If maybe family loyalty should outweigh everything else. And then I looked at Milo. Our cat was curled up on David's lap, purring contentedly as David scratched behind his ears. He's alive because we got him to the veterinarian in time. He's recovering because Dr. Rivera had the skills to counteract antifreeze poisoning. But he almost died because my mother decided his life was worthless compared to her need to control mine. The psychological warfare intensified as Patricia's court date approached. David received a handwritten letter from her, delivered through his cousin Tom to avoid violating the restraining order Detective Martinez had recommended. The letter was a masterpiece of emotional manipulation, combining maternal guilt, family obligation, and subtle threats. My dearest David, it began, I cannot believe that my beloved son, the child I raised with such devotion and sacrifice, has chosen to destroy our family over a misunderstanding about a pet. Your father would be heartbroken to see how you've turned against the woman who dedicated her life to your happiness and success. The letter continued for 3 pages, alternating between expressions of hurt disappointment and veiled warnings about the consequences of Patricia's prosecution. She mentioned David's upcoming performance review at Northwest Logistics, suggested that criminal charges against a family member might affect his professional reputation, and hinted that other relatives were reconsidering their relationships with him. She's threatening everything, David said after reading the letter aloud. My job, my extended family relationships, my professional standing in the community. She's making it clear that prosecuting her will cost me more than it costs her. Are you reconsidering? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. David was quiet for a long time, holding Patricia's letter while Milo dozed peacefully in his lap. I keep thinking about something she wrote when I was in college, he said finally. I was struggling with organic chemistry, ready to drop the pre-med track, and she sent me a letter about persistence and moral courage. She said that doing the right thing often requires standing alone against pressure to compromise your principles. And now I realize she was teaching me lessons she didn't believe in herself. Patricia Thompson's moral courage extends only to situations that benefit her directly. When her own actions are questioned, when her control is threatened, she abandons every principle she claimed to value. The letter wasn't Patricia's only weapon. Over the next week, David received calls from family friends, former neighbors, and even his high school guidance counselor, all expressing concern about the family conflict and suggesting that forgiveness was more important than justice. The coordination was obvious but effective, creating a constant stream of voices questioning David's judgment and loyalty. Patricia had also hired an expensive defense attorney who immediately launched a public relations campaign portraying her as a devoted mother being persecuted by an ungrateful son over an accidental pet injury. The local newspaper ran a story about increasing family conflicts over pet care responsibilities, featuring anonymous quotes about the emotional and financial burdens of modern pet ownership. She's controlling the narrative, I observed after reading the newspaper article, making this about generational differences in pet attitudes instead of deliberate animal cruelty. The most disturbing development came when Linda Carter approached me at the grocery store, her expression uncomfortable and apologetic. Claire, I need to tell you something about Monday morning when Mrs. Thompson was at your house. What about it? I didn't just see her car in your driveway longer than usual, Linda said quietly. I saw her in your backyard around 11:30. She was near your garden shed carrying something small and dark. At the time, I thought she might be helping with yard work, but now? The revelation was chilling. Patricia hadn't just brought antifreeze into our home. She'd apparently prepared for the possibility of needing to dispose of evidence or retrieve materials she'd hidden on our property. Did you tell Detective Martinez about this? I called her this morning, Linda confirmed. She's getting a search warrant for your shed and the area around it. Claire, I'm sorry I didn't mention this sooner. I didn't want to get involved in family drama, but after hearing about the arrest, that afternoon, Detective Martinez and a forensics team searched our garden shed and the surrounding area. What they found was damning. A small plastic container that had held antifreeze, wiped clean but still containing trace amounts of ethylene glycol. Patricia had brought the poison to our home, administered it to Milo, and hidden the evidence in our own backyard, apparently planning to retrieve it later when suspicion had died down. This establishes premeditation, Detective Martinez explained. She didn't act impulsively or accidentally. She planned the poisoning in advance, brought the materials to your home, executed the crime, and attempted to conceal evidence. This elevates the charges significantly. The news of additional evidence seemed to shake Patricia's confidence. Her expensive attorney immediately requested a plea bargain meeting, suggesting that his client might be willing to admit to lesser charges in exchange for avoiding trial. What does that mean for us? David asked District Attorney Michael Chen during our meeting to discuss the plea offer. It means she's acknowledging guilt while trying to minimize consequences. DA Chen replied. She's offering to plead guilty to reckless endangerment of an animal instead of intentional cruelty, accept probation and community service instead of jail time, and pay for Milo's veterinary expenses. And if we refuse the plea bargain, we go to trial with strong evidence for premeditated animal cruelty. If convicted, she could face up to 5 years in prison and significant fines. But trials are unpredictable, and she has resources to hire good legal representation. David looked at me across DA Chen's conference table, and I could see him weighing justice against the practical realities of our situation. Accepting the plea meant Patricia would face some consequences while avoiding the publicity and family trauma of a trial. Rejecting it meant months of legal proceedings, media attention, and continued family pressure. What would the probation terms include? I asked. No contact with you, David, or Claire for the duration of the probation period, DA Chen replied. No unsupervised contact with animals. Mandatory counseling for anger management and control issues. And if she violates any terms, she serves the full prison sentence. How long is the probation period? 3 years. Long enough to establish whether she can change her behavior patterns, or whether she'll continue trying to control and manipulate family relationships. That evening, David and I sat in our living room with Milo stretched across both our laps, discussing the most difficult decision of our marriage. The plea bargain offered guaranteed consequences for Patricia while protecting us from months of legal stress and family conflict. But it also felt like letting her escape the full accountability she deserved for trying to murder our cat. What do you want to do? I asked David. I want her to serve prison time, he said honestly. I want her to understand that actions have consequences, that you can't try to kill something innocent just because it threatens your control. But I also know that 3 years of no contact might accomplish more than 6 months in jail, followed by her immediate return to manipulating family relationships. Are you sure you can handle 3 years of family pressure? 3 years of relatives trying to convince you to reconcile with her? David considered the question seriously. I think the family pressure will be easier to handle than watching her go unpunished. And Claire, I'm starting to realize that some of these family relationships might not be worth preserving if they require me to excuse attempted murder. The revelation had been building over the past 2 weeks, as David processed which relatives supported our decision to seek justice, and which ones prioritized family harmony over accountability. Uncle Frank's suggestion that we handle the matter privately had revealed his willingness to overlook criminal behavior for the sake of avoiding conflict. Cousin Jenny's emotional manipulation had shown her investment in maintaining familiar family dynamics regardless of their toxicity. Maybe Patricia doing something this extreme was actually a gift, David said slowly. It forced everyone to show their true priorities. The people who support prosecuting someone for trying to kill our cat are the people who actually share our values. The ones pressuring us to forgive and forget are the ones who've been enabling her controlling behavior all along. The decision felt momentous when we called DHN the next morning. Accepting the plea bargain meant acknowledging that justice sometimes involves compromise, that protecting our future peace was worth more than maximum punishment for Patricia's past crime. "We'll accept the plea agreement," David told DHN, "but we want the no-contact order to be absolute. No communication through relatives, no presence at family gatherings we attend, no indirect contact of any kind. That's included in the standard terms," DHN confirmed. "And Mr. Thompson, I want you to know that your willingness to prosecute this case sends an important message about animal cruelty. Too often, these crimes go unreported because they happen within families." Patricia's plea hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. David and I attended, wanting to see her formally acknowledge guilt and accept consequences for her actions. She appeared in court wearing her most conservative outfit, accompanied by her expensive attorney and several character witnesses who testified about her decades of community service and devotion to family. When Judge Rebecca Walsh asked Patricia to state her plea, there was a long pause before she spoke. "Guilty, Your Honor. I plead guilty to reckless endangerment of an animal." The words were barely audible, but they represented something I'd never expected to hear. Patricia Thompson, the woman who had controlled every aspect of David's life for 34 years, admitting in open court that she had committed a crime against our beloved pet. Judge Walsh imposed the agreed-upon sentence: 3 years probation, 200 hours of community service at the Cedar Falls Animal Shelter, mandatory counseling for control and anger issues, reimbursement of Milo's veterinary expenses, and absolute no contact with David, me, or any pets in our household. "Mrs. Thompson," Judge Walsh said before concluding the hearing, "I want to be clear about something. This animal survived because of excellent veterinary care and his family's quick response. Your actions could easily have resulted in his death. I hope you use this probation period to reflect seriously on the difference between love and control, between family devotion and manipulation." As we left the courthouse, David seemed simultaneously relieved and sad. Patricia had been held accountable for her crime, but the cost had been the complete dissolution of the mother-son relationship that had defined his entire life. "Do you regret it?" I asked as we drove home. "I regret that it was necessary," David replied. "I regret that the woman who raised me was capable of trying to kill something innocent out of jealousy and control. But I don't regret protecting Milo, and I don't regret refusing to excuse her behavior." That afternoon, we received a final delivery from Patricia. Not another manipulative letter, but a box containing every gift David had ever given her, every family photo that included him, every memento of their relationship. The message was clear: if she couldn't control the relationship, she was ending it entirely. David opened the box slowly, examining items that represented decades of shared history. Birthday cards he'd made as a child, school awards she'd framed, photos from graduations and holidays, and quiet family moments. The comprehensive rejection of their entire relationship felt like one final act of cruelty, a punishment for his refusal to prioritize her needs over justice. "She's trying to hurt you," I observed. "She's showing me who she really is," David corrected. "A woman who views love as a transaction, family as a business relationship she can terminate when the terms don't suit her." This box isn't about hurt, Claire. It's about honesty. For the first time in my life, Patricia Thompson is being completely honest about how she sees me. As evening fell, we sat with Milo in our living room, surrounded by the remnants of Patricia's final manipulation. Our cat was healthy, our marriage was stronger, and our home was finally free from the threat of someone who would hurt innocent creatures to maintain control. But I also knew that Patricia's 3-year probation was just the beginning of a longer journey. We would need to rebuild family relationships without her influence, create new traditions that reflected our actual values, and learn to navigate the world without the constant presence of someone who had shaped David's entire understanding of family loyalty and obligation. The story wasn't over. Patricia Thompson's willingness to try murder to maintain control suggested someone who wouldn't easily accept permanent loss of influence over her son's life. 3 years of mandated no contact might provide breathing room, but it wouldn't necessarily change the fundamental dynamics that had led to Milo's poisoning. For now, though, we had won something precious: the right to live authentically, to love freely, and to protect the innocent members of our family from those who would hurt them for selfish reasons. Milo's survival and recovery had become a symbol of something larger: the possibility of breaking free from toxic relationships and building a life based on genuine love, rather than manipulation and control. 2 months into Patricia's probation, I discovered she wasn't simply accepting her punishment quietly. The revelation came through an unexpected source. Rose Williams, a woman whose name I'd never heard, but who called our house one rainy February evening with information that changed everything I thought I knew about Patricia Thompson. "Mrs. Thompson, my name is Rose Williams, and I was married to your husband's brother Michael for 6 years," she began, her voice carrying the careful tone of someone who'd rehearsed this conversation multiple times. "I've been following the news about your mother-in-law's arrest, and I need to tell you some things about Patricia that your family probably doesn't know." David took the phone, his expression puzzled. "Michael? I don't have a brother named Michael." "You had a stepbrother," Rose corrected gently. "Your father remarried briefly when you were 8 years old, before he died." Patricia made sure that relationship disappeared from family history, along with any record of Michael's existence. The conversation that followed lasted 3 hours and revealed a pattern of behavior that made Milo's poisoning seem like merely the latest incident in decades of calculated cruelty. Rose painted a picture of Patricia Thompson that was both familiar and terrifying: a woman who systematically eliminated anyone she viewed as competition for her son's devotion. "Patricia couldn't tolerate your father's remarriage," Rose explained. "She'd divorced him when David was 6. But she expected to remain the center of his emotional life. When he married Michael's mother and started building a blended family, Patricia launched a campaign to destroy the relationship." According to Rose, Patricia had used every weapon in her arsenal: anonymous calls to Robert Thompson's employer suggesting his new wife was unstable, carefully orchestrated family emergencies that required Robert's attention whenever he planned special time with his stepson, and, most devastatingly, false allegations of child abuse that resulted in a lengthy custody battle and ultimately the dissolution of Robert's second marriage. "By the time Michael and I married, he'd already been conditioned to see Patricia as dangerous," Rose continued. "He warned me about her, but I thought he was exaggerating. I thought surely a grandmother would welcome additional family members." Rose's experience with Patricia had been a masterclass in psychological warfare: subtle undermining of her relationship with Michael, strategic manipulation of family gatherings to exclude her, and a relentless campaign to convince Michael that his wife was causing family division by questioning Patricia's authority. "The final straw came when Michael and I announced we were pregnant," Rose said, her voice growing heavy with old pain. "Patricia couldn't tolerate the idea of sharing grandmotherly duties, of having her position as the family matriarch diluted by another woman's needs and opinions. What Patricia did next was both creative and cruel. She orchestrated a family intervention, claiming that Rose had been exhibiting concerning behaviors that suggested mental instability. She'd enlisted David's Aunt Margaret and Uncle Frank, presenting carefully edited accounts of Rose's interactions with family members, and suggesting that pregnancy hormones were exacerbating existing psychological problems. "The family actually staged an intervention," Rose said incredulously, "sitting me down in Patricia's living room, expressing concerns about my fitness as a future mother, suggesting I needed professional help before the baby arrived. Michael was so confused and manipulated by his family's apparent consensus that he started questioning his own perceptions of my behavior." The pregnancy ended in miscarriage during the 7th month, a devastating loss that Rose attributed partly to the stress of Patricia's campaign against her. Instead of supporting Rose and Michael through their grief, Patricia used the tragedy to further her narrative about Rose's instability. She actually suggested at the funeral that perhaps the miscarriage was a blessing, that bringing a child into our unstable situation might not have been wise, Rose said, her voice breaking with remembered pain. Michael finally saw her clearly in that moment, saw the cruelty beneath all her claims of family devotion. But it was too late for our marriage. Rose and Michael divorced 2 years later, their relationship unable to recover from Patricia's systematic destruction of trust and family support. Michael moved across the country, changed his name, and severed all contact with the Thompson family. Patricia had successfully eliminated another threat to her exclusive relationship with David. "Why are you telling us this now?" David asked, his voice hoarse with the weight of these revelations. "Because I saw the news about your cat, and I recognized the pattern," Rose replied. "Patricia views anyone or anything that claims your emotional attention as competition to be eliminated. Your wife, your pets, your future children if you have them. She'll escalate until she destroys whatever threatens her control." "But she's on probation now. She can't contact us or come to our house." Rose's laugh was bitter. "David, your mother spent 2 years destroying my marriage while maintaining perfect plausible deniability. She never directly threatened me, never broke any laws, never did anything that could be prosecuted. But she systematically eliminated me from your family, just like she's eliminated everyone else who might dilute her influence over you." After hanging up, David and I sat in stunned silence, processing the implications of what Rose had told us. Patricia's attempt to poison Milo wasn't an isolated incident of jealousy and control. It was the latest escalation in a lifelong pattern of eliminating perceived threats to her dominance over David's emotional life. "How many people has she driven away?" David asked quietly. "How many relationships have I lost because my mother saw them as competition?" I thought about the friends who drifted away over the years, the colleagues who'd stopped inviting us to social events, the neighbors who'd become distant after initially welcoming us to Maple Ridge Estates. How many of those changes in relationship dynamics had been influenced by Patricia's subtle campaigns of undermining and exclusion? "We need to warn people," I said finally. "If she's capable of trying to kill Milo, if she's spent decades destroying relationships that threaten her control, we need to make sure she can't hurt anyone else during her probation period." David nodded grimly. "And we need to prepare for what happens when her probation ends. 3 years of no contact doesn't change someone's fundamental character. If anything, it might just give her more time to plan her next campaign." The following week, we reached out to Dr. Marcus Rivera at Riverside Animal Hospital, Detective Martinez, and DA Chen, sharing Rose's information and requesting additional protective measures. The revelation about Patricia's history of systematic manipulation prompted a more thorough investigation into her background and current activities. What they discovered was disturbing. Patricia had been volunteering at the Cedar Falls Animal Shelter as required by her community service sentence. But several staff members had reported concerning interactions with both animals and visitors. She'd made comments about difficult pets that needed to be euthanized rather than adopted, had questioned the judgment of families seeking to adopt multiple animals, and had been observed handling cats with unnecessary roughness. "She's using her required community service to continue her pattern of controlling and undermining," Detective Martinez explained during our follow-up meeting. "The shelter director is considering requesting a change in her service assignment because of complaints from both staff and visitors." More concerning was evidence that Patricia had been testing the boundaries of her no-contact order. While she hadn't directly contacted David or me, she'd been asking family members detailed questions about our daily routines, our work schedules, and Milo's health. The questioning had been subtle enough that most relatives hadn't recognized it as information gathering, but the pattern was clear when viewed comprehensively. "She's conducting surveillance through family members," DA Chen observed. "Learning your habits and routines while maintaining plausible deniability about violating the no-contact order." The realization that Patricia was already planning her next campaign of control and manipulation prompted us to make a difficult decision. David called his Aunt Margaret, Uncle Frank, and Cousin Jenny, informing them about Rose's revelations, and asking them to cease sharing any information about our lives with Patricia. The response was predictably mixed. Margaret expressed shock about the information regarding Michael and Rose, claiming she'd never heard about Robert Thompson's second marriage, or the circumstances surrounding its dissolution. Uncle Frank seemed skeptical, suggesting that Rose might be exaggerating past events or harboring resentment about her failed marriage. Jenny was the most resistant, insisting that Patricia deserved family support during her difficult probation period. "You're asking us to choose sides," Jenny complained during a particularly tense phone call. "To cut off Aunt Patricia completely based on stories from someone who's been out of the family for 20 years. I'm asking you to stop providing information that she's using to plan future harassment," David replied firmly. "If you want to maintain a relationship with Patricia, that's your choice. But I won't let her use family connections to continue monitoring and manipulating our lives." The ultimatum was harsh but necessary. Several relatives chose to maintain their relationships with Patricia, while respecting our request for information boundaries. Others, including Jenny and Uncle Frank, viewed our demands as unreasonable and gradually distanced themselves from us entirely. "We're losing more family," I observed after another awkward conversation with a relative who seemed to blame us for creating family division. "We're losing people who prioritize comfortable illusions over uncomfortable truths," David corrected. "The relatives who are standing by us understand that accountability matters more than family harmony." Spring arrived with news that Patricia had been terminated from her volunteer position at the animal shelter. The official reason was quote, 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 but shelter director Karen Hughes provided more specific details when Detective Martinez inquired about the circumstances. "She was actively discouraging adoptions," Hughes explained, telling potential families that pets were expensive burdens, that animals required too much emotional investment, that people should focus on human relationships, instead of wasting resources on creatures that couldn't reciprocate. She seemed genuinely angry about the entire concept of pet ownership. The revelation confirmed our growing understanding of Patricia's psychology. Her attempt to poison Milo hadn't been motivated solely by jealousy about his place in our family. It had been driven by a fundamental belief that emotional attachments to animals were inherently wrong, wasteful, and threatening to proper family priorities. Patricia's court-ordered counseling sessions were providing additional insights into her mindset. Dr. Sarah Chen, the psychologist assigned to her case, contacted us with permission to share general observations about Patricia's progress and attitudes. Mrs. Thompson continues to view her actions as justified response to what she sees as your misplaced priorities, Dr. Chen explained during a confidential phone consultation. She expresses regret about being caught and prosecuted, but not about the underlying decision to eliminate what she viewed as unhealthy family dynamics. "Is she capable of change?" David asked. "People can change, but it requires genuine recognition that their behavior was wrong and harmful," Dr. Chen replied. Mrs. Thompson remains convinced that she was trying to help your family by removing what she saw as a distraction from more important matters. Until she accepts that animals deserve protection and that your emotional attachments are valid, she remains potentially dangerous. The psychological evaluation was sobering but not surprising. Patricia Thompson had spent 68 years developing and refining a worldview that placed her needs and judgments above everyone else's autonomy and happiness. 3 years of probation and counseling might modify her behavior slightly, but they wouldn't fundamentally alter her belief that she had the right to control and manipulate other people's lives. Summer brought an unexpected development when Milo's veterinary checkup revealed complete recovery from his poisoning ordeal. Dr. Rivera pronounced him healthy and resilient, with no lasting effects from Patricia's attempt to murder him. "He's actually gained weight and seems more confident than before," Dr. Rivera observed as Milo purred contentedly during his examination. Sometimes surviving trauma can actually strengthen an animal's constitution and trust in their family's protection. The symbolism wasn't lost on either David or me. Milo's recovery and increased confidence paralleled our own healing from Patricia's toxic influence. Our marriage was stronger, our home felt more peaceful, and our daily routines were no longer shadowed by the constant low-level stress of managing Patricia's expectations and demands. We'd also developed new friendships with people who shared our values about family, loyalty, and the inherent worth of all living creatures. Linda Carter had become a close friend, bonding with us over her own experiences with difficult in-laws. Dr. Rivera and his wife had invited us to several dinner parties, where we'd met other couples who treated their pets as beloved family members. We have a real community now, I observed one evening as we prepared dinner while Milo supervised from his favorite perch on the kitchen counter. People who understand that love isn't a competition, that caring for animals doesn't diminish our capacity for human relationships. David nodded, scratching Milo behind the ears. I keep thinking about what Patricia said about focusing on more important family matters. She never understood that Milo is family, that love multiplies rather than divides when you share it generously. As Patricia's first year of probation neared its end, we received disturbing news through Detective Martinez. Patricia had been asking detailed questions about the specific terms of her no-contact order, particularly about what would happen if she attended public events where we might also be present. She's testing boundaries again, Detective Martinez warned, looking for loopholes in the legal restrictions that would allow her to reestablish contact without technically violating her probation terms. The concern was validated when Patricia appeared at David's company's annual holiday party, an event she'd attended regularly before her arrest. While she didn't approach us directly or attempt conversation, her presence was clearly calculated to create discomfort and demonstrate that her influence couldn't be completely eliminated. "She's sending a message," David said as we left the party early to avoid any potential confrontation. "That she's still part of the community, still connected to my professional life, still capable of inserting herself into situations where we're supposed to feel safe." The incident prompted us to consult with our lawyer about additional protective measures. While Patricia hadn't technically violated her probation, her behavior suggested escalating attempts to circumvent legal restrictions and reestablish control over our lives. "We need to document everything," Attorney Helen Wu advised. "Every appearance at events you attend, every question she asks relatives about your activities, every behavior that suggests she's planning to resume her campaign of manipulation when her probation ends." Winter arrived with news that fundamentally changed our perspective on Patricia's future threat level. Rose Williams called with information she'd received from Michael, David's stepbrother, who'd been living under an assumed name in Portland for 15 years. Patricia hired a private investigator to locate Michael, Rose explained, her voice tight with concern. "She's apparently spent the last year trying to track down everyone she considers unfinished business from her past campaigns of family control." The revelation was chilling. Patricia wasn't simply marking time during her probation. She was conducting comprehensive research into past victims and planning systematic revenge against everyone who'd escaped her influence or testified against her methods. Michael's been living quietly in Portland, working as a teacher, completely removed from anything connected to the Thompson family, Rose continued. But now he's had investigators asking his neighbors about his daily routines, his relationships, his pets. Patricia's preparing for something big when her legal restrictions end. The information prompted an emergency meeting with Detective Martinez and DA Chen. If Patricia was conducting surveillance on multiple former victims across state lines, her activities might constitute harassment or stalking that could justify additional legal intervention. Unfortunately, hiring private investigators isn't illegal, even when the motivation is concerning, DA Chen explained. Unless Patricia directly contacts these people or threatens them explicitly, she's not violating any laws by gathering information about their lives. But surely the pattern suggests intent to commit future crimes? Possibly, but the legal system can't prosecute someone for crimes they might commit based on information gathering that isn't inherently illegal, Detective Martinez added. "We can monitor the situation and respond quickly if she escalates to actual harassment or threats, but preventative intervention has strict legal limitations." The realization that Patricia was essentially free to plan revenge campaigns against multiple victims while maintaining technical compliance with her probation terms was deeply unsettling. She'd learned from her experience with Milo's poisoning, understanding now that successful manipulation required more careful legal boundaries and plausible deniability. As Patricia's second year of probation progressed, we implemented additional security measures for our home and daily routines. Security cameras around our property, varied schedules that made our movements less predictable, and a comprehensive support network of friends and neighbors who understood the ongoing threat Patricia represented. Milo, now fully recovered and thriving, had become an inadvertent symbol of resistance against Patricia's philosophy of control and manipulation. His obvious happiness, his secure place in our family, and his trust in our protection represented everything Patricia had tried to destroy through her campaign of elimination. The most satisfying development came when David received recognition at Northwest Logistics for his exemplary client relationships and management skills. The anonymous complaint Patricia had orchestrated about his professional priorities had ultimately backfired, drawing attention to his actual performance record and resulting in a promotion to regional director. "She tried to destroy my career because I chose to protect Milo," David said as we celebrated his promotion with dinner at our favorite restaurant. "Instead, standing up for what I believed in demonstrated leadership qualities that advanced my career beyond what I'd achieved while trying to please her." As we raised our glasses in celebration, Milo waited patiently at home in the secure, loving environment Patricia had tried to destroy. His survival and our family's resilience proved that authentic love could overcome even the most calculated campaigns of manipulation and control. The future remained uncertain. Patricia's probation would end eventually, and her pattern of escalating revenge suggested that her next campaign might be more sophisticated and dangerous than her attempt to poison Milo. But we'd learned something valuable about the difference between conditional love that demanded compliance and unconditional love that protected the vulnerable. Whatever Patricia planned for her post-probation campaign of control, we would face it with the strength that came from choosing authenticity over manipulation, love over dominance, and justice over family harmony. Milo's place in our family remained secure, our marriage had been strengthened by surviving Patricia's assault on our values, and our understanding of true family loyalty had been clarified through the painful process of holding someone accountable for their crimes against innocence. The lesson Patricia had inadvertently taught us was profound. Genuine love protects rather than controls, nurtures rather than eliminates, and grows stronger when tested by those who would destroy it for selfish purposes. In trying to eliminate what she saw as competition for David's devotion, Patricia had actually strengthened our family's bonds and clarified our priorities in ways that would protect us from future manipulation. Milo curled up between us on the couch that night, purring contentedly as we planned a future free from the toxic influence of someone who viewed love as a zero-sum game. His recovery and happiness were proof that sometimes the greatest victory against cruelty is simply continuing to love openly, generously, and without fear of those who would poison what they cannot control. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.